Every year, the UN Environment Program releases its big report card on climate change, the Emissions Gap Report. It's basically our global progress report, and the 2025 edition just dropped. So let's break it down and see what it tells us about where we stand.
Sometimes a title says it all. The title of this year's report is just two words: off target. That sets a pretty stark and sobering tone right from the get-go, and it tells you almost everything you need to know about the report's main conclusion. Okay, so to really get what this report is saying, we first need to understand its core idea. What exactly is this emissions gap they keep talking about? Well, here's the official definition, but think of it like this. There are two paths in front of us. There's the path science says we absolutely must take to keep warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees. And then there's the path we're actually on, based on current plans. The emissions gap, it's that huge and frankly growing space between those two paths. Now, you're going to see this acronym NDCs all over the place. Don't let it trip you up. It's just UN speak for Nationally Determined Contributions. The easiest way to think of them is as each country's official climate action plan. It's their public promise for how they're going to cut their emissions. These plans are what determine the path we're currently on. All right, let's get into the heart of the report. This is where we answer the big questions. How wide is that gap right now? And what does that actually mean for us in the real world? Just take a look at this chart for a second. It shows greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 all the way to 2024. The trend is, well, it's undeniable, isn't it? It's going up. Despite all the promises and pledges, our total global emissions just keep rising. And that brings us to a brand new record, and not the good kind. In 2024, global emissions hit 57.7 gigatons. What's really worrying, though, is the speed. The report points out that the growth rate is now more than 4 times the average we saw back in the 2010s. So we're not just going in the wrong direction, we're actually speeding up. So this is the million-dollar question, right? If you take all those national plans, all those NDCs, and you assume every single country meets its target perfectly, what does that future actually look like? And the report's answer is pretty chilling. Even with full implementation of every single plan on the books, we are still on a path toward 2.3 to 2.5 degrees Celsius of warming. That is way, way above the 1.5 degree target from the Paris Agreement. This really gets to the core conflict of the whole report. It's a tale of two totally different paths. The path we need to be on versus the one our policies are actually paving. And this slide just lays it out in stark numbers. Look at this. To have a shot at that 1.5 degree target, we need a massive 55% cut in emissions by 2035. But where are our current plans taking us? To a mere 15% reduction. The report calls this the implementation gap. It's the massive chasm between what science demands and what we're actually doing. And, it's not just that the plans are weak, it's also a problem of participation. This chart shows that only 60 countries have submitted their plans. Now, that sounds like a lot, but together they only account for about 63% of global emissions. That means over a third of all greenhouse gases come from countries that haven't even put a plan on the table. So what does this all add up to for our future? The report doesn't just crunch the numbers. It also lays out the major risks we're facing if we continue down this road. So here are the final hard-hitting takeaways. First, the overshoot risk. The report says it's now very likely we're going to blow past that 1.5 degree target, at least temporarily, and probably within the next 10 years. Second, it really focuses on the major emitters. The G20 nations alone are responsible for a staggering 77% of global emissions. And third, that same group of powerful economies is fundamentally off track to meet their own 2030 climate goals. So the report's conclusion is brutally honest. We are off target. The gap between our goals and our actions isn't shrinking, it's getting wider. And that leaves us all with the most urgent question there is. With the clock ticking louder every day, how can the world possibly get back on track?